Good afternoon. This is the fifth meeting of the Civic Works Committee, held virtually during the COVID-19 emergency. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for Council, Standing or Advisory Committee meetings and information upon request. To make requests for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make requests specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca. For those viewing, I have Councillor Fife Millar with me in chambers. Everyone else is with me online, and we do have all members of the committee present, to which I'm looking to them for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Could committee members put their screens on just for a quorum check and to disclosures of pecuniary interest? Perfect. Okay, seeing no disclosures of pecuniary interest, we'll move on to the consent items. Please note that there is the added agenda today for items coming up later. So on consent, we have items 2.1 through to 2.6, looking to committee to see if they would like anything pulled separate. Okay, seeing none so far. Looking for a mover and a seconder of consent items, moved by Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. Looking to committee for any questions of items 2.1 through to 2.6. And I will start my speakers list with Councillor Van Holst, followed by Councillor Van Meerbergen. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I wanted to make a comment about a couple of items. First, 2.2, congratulations for a 100% mark on the inspection for the drinking water system. Great job. That's not the first time that's happened, but it's great to see that we've got consistent excellence in that system. And 2.3, I was really impressed with the energy savings, some staggering savings there. And so I was just going to follow up and get a little more details. I think that is largely because we're moving to a incinerating substances that have less water in them. So we've got an improved dewatering process. And of course, if you want to incinerate something, the first thing you've got to do is boil off the water, essentially. And of course, that takes a lot of energy. So if you put a pot of water on the stove and try to boil it all off, that takes quite a while. So just confirming with staff that's actually the source of the savings.
Absolutely.
Or a large portion of it.
Thank you for that. Ms. Ramalou, can you please speak to item 2.3, as it was an excellent report?
Thank you. Absolutely. So through the chair, yes, that is one of the sources of energy savings. We do have a number noted in the report but that is a significant one, definitely. And you do have the mechanism there, right?
Follow-up, Councillor?
Okay. Well, that's excellent. All I can say is this is great work, and I think many people will be pleased about this. It's great for the green, great for the bottom line, and so I offer my thanks.
Okay, thank you. Your worship, just so you know, items 2.1 and 2. All consent items are on the floor, and next on my speakers list is Councillor Van Merbergen.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to speak to 2.5, which has to do with the expansion, the widening of Southdale Road West, as well as the upcoming roundabout at Colonel Talbot in Southdale. This is indeed a good news story, a great day for Southwest London. Anyone who lives or has to travel through that quadrant knows how congested that two-lane road, which carries such significant traffic, is. And considering the fact that there's so much development, which is not only ongoing as we speak, but is proposed, this is absolute necessity. So again, a great day. We can look forward to construction starting. It looks like 2022, this construction season from Pine Valley to Bostwick Farnham, and then onwards after that, and 2024 to the roundabout at Colonel Talbot. This will bring much needed relief to the residents in the Southwest. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Looking for further speakers, and welcome to Councillor Lewis and Councillor Hillier as well today as they've joined us virtually. Okay, last call for questions for all consent items through 2.1 through to 2.6. Seeing as it's been moved and seconded, I will call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Schedule items, we are right on time. Public participation meetings for amendments to consolidate fees and charges bylaw for Dundas Street vendor pilot program. Staff is with us today to answer any questions. I would need a mover and a seconder to open the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Mayor Holder. Okay, opening the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Looking to Committee Room 5 to make sure that we've had no unanticipated walk-ins that would be joining us today.
Madam Chair, we don't have any participants in Committee Room 5 or online.
Okay, and we have no one in the gallery with us today either. So looking for a motion to close the public participation meeting. Moved by Councillor Van Merbergen, seconded by Mayor Holder. And we do have a communication on the added today for someone who did send in their comments in advance. So thank you to them for that. And calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
As this is an exciting pilot project that's proposed, looking to committee to see if there's questions or comments, or if they would like staff to give an overview or additional information. Okay, I will start the speakers list with Councillor Fife Millar, followed by Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'm wondering to staff if they could speak a little bit on the engagement that was done with the bricks and mortar businesses that were on Dundas. I think the report says that they're highly supportive, but I wonder if we can just get some comments on that, please.
Okay, to staff.
Your worship, or Chair, it's Jim Yanchuluk speaking. Our core area programs manager, Ryan Craven, went around to individual businesses in formulating the proposed vendor program and the fee. It was warmly received by many of the businesses. It wasn't unanimous, as none of these things ever are. The main takeaway from the engagement of the businesses were that understanding that this is a pilot project, and it's going to be reviewed at the end of the pilot period this year. We'll know whether it continues or it doesn't, and what information is gleaned by being able to pilot it.
A follow-up, Councillor?
No, thank you very much for that response.
Okay, I'll go to I'm going to do committee first, but I do see Councillor Lewis will pose a question once committee is done. So Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you. So I was pleased that we're charging by the quarter. I think that's great for some vendors who, for instance, might be selling Christmas decorations or garden seeds. They would only want to be there for part of the year. So it's good that we split that up. I know there's other programs that we have where I've had complaints that, oh, I only needed a portion of this. So I think we're on top of it there. I had a chance to see the vendors out there at last year, and I thought it was great. And I'm also thrilled that the bricks and mortar people like it as well. So I think these are great programs. It's going to be fun to see what comes of them. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, Councillor Lewis, welcome, and please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you acknowledging me and giving me an opportunity to speak to this at your committee. I'm going to echo the comments that have already been made. I think they're good comments and they're quite valid. Councillor Van Holst is quite right that the quarterly approach makes a lot of sense. I will say that I have heard, aside from the communication on the agenda, I have heard from a couple of downtown merchants who are a bit concerned about the fee being so low and the potential to have to compete with pop-up vendors when they're paying much higher costs to be brick and mortar shops. So I think it's really relevant to hear through Mr. Yanchula and Mr. Craven that the bricks and mortar support is not unanimous on this, but I think everybody's interested in giving it a try. And that's a good thing. As we're coming out of COVID in particular, the opportunity to activate Dundas Place in this way, I think has some real pluses. Certainly, I'm looking forward to the review at the end because I do have some concerns that the fees are just being done as an administrative fee, that there's no sort of cost recovery. I noted in the report that the day-to-day management sort of things will be covered by the ambassador program for this point, but I'm going to be interested to see if this requires more street cleaning, more garbage collection, that kind of thing as well, because that's certainly a potential for us operationally. So I guess I want to share that I'm cautiously optimistic about this. And I think that we'll have to take a look at how it performs in its first year and then perhaps make some tweaks to it along the way. But this is the kind of thing that I think offers some opportunity to hopefully, in the long run, attract some long-term tenants to spaces on Dundas Place when they see that there can actually be a market for the type of business they're operating in the downtown core. So just wanted to share those thoughts. I'll be supportive of this at council. It's not without some concerns, but I think in overall, as a pilot project, it's well set up, and we'll see how it goes from there.
Thank you, Councillor, for joining us in your comments today. Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. I'm mindful, I appreciate this, Chair. I'm mindful of a note that's in our package from Mr. Bill Robinson from Target Hi-Fi, and he makes reference to the kinds of goods that can be sold. And this is kind of piggyback to Councillor Lewis's comments, where they pay good taxes to be where they are on Dundas Street. So my practical question is, perhaps through you to Mr. Yanchula, what's the thought of the types of businesses that might well be setting up shop on Dundas Place for that period? Are there any restrictions, or how will that work exactly, please?
Thank you for that. To staff.
So Mr. Craven will be accepting applications and then reviewing them for best fits through what is on the street and what the season is. So if I can link it back to what Councillor Van Holst said, for an example, in certain seasons of the year, there'll be things that only are appropriate, and those would be first choice. It is, after all, a curated program. It's meant to complement what's there, not compete with what's there. And so there are some times, though, where in economic development theory, clusters of like products reinforce everybody. So sometimes the rising tide lifts all the boats. These are the things that we're going to experiment with through the pilot period to see where we go too far and where we, when we're contacting the different businesses for saying, okay, this is going to be set up in front of 179 Dundas, making sure that we have buy-in, because we want it to reinforce the image of Dundas Place and not create new problems that we don't need.
Well, Chair, through you, I'm not always sure that I agree that kind attracts kind. I mean, it does when you think of the Golden Mile with people looking for a vehicle and makes easier access. But all those people compete at a fair and consistent level in terms of outlay. And I'm talking about people that pay taxes, that pay staff, and staff isn't just the direct wage cost, but the ancillary costs that are associated with that. And when it comes to things like food products, the health concerns, we know that the health unit is very vigorous in its vetting process. And I speak from experience coming from a family that has food products, and the health unit is very vigorous in their ensuring that everything from safety notices, safety equipment, sinks and the like. And I guess if there's food product associated with that as an example, and it's only one example, will the same kinds of, through you to again, perhaps Mr. Ianchulo, will the same kinds of health and safety considerations be there? Or will health unit be as vigorous with Dundas Place, which I quite love the spirit of attracting people downtown more, but will those same kinds of standards be in place?
To staff?
Through the chair, yes, Mr. Mayor, those will be in place. Foods will not be part of the Dundas Place food, prepared foods that you can walk away and eat on the spot. Those are governed through the refreshment vehicle license program. This is to permit more goods and services. I would say, I don't know what the services would be actually, but certainly it is meant to comply with all the applicable standards. What we're doing here is trying to peg a fee for interesting objects, I'll call it at this moment. We have to see what comes in before we kind of know who's interested.
Chair, I appreciate that. And the fact that Mr. Ianchulo indicated that there would be some form of vetting process gives me some comfort. So I'll support this certainly in committee. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Looking to visiting councilors or committee for any further questions or comments? Okay, then I would need a mover and a seconder to have this bylaw introduced at municipal council. Moved by Councillor Fife Millar, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, that concludes our scheduled items. Under items for direction today, we have 7. I will ask that we deal with 4.1 through to 4.3 together, as they are all related and companion reports for 4.2 and 4.3. Okay, so I would look for a mover and a seconder, and then I would go to Ms. Dan for her overview of all those 3 items. Moved by Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Mayor Holder. Okay, the items on the floor. Ms. Dan, can you please present items 4.1 and then how 4.2 and 4.3 relate to your reports? Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and through the chair, my name is Jenny Dan, and I'm the Director of Construction and Infrastructure Services. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide a brief introduction for this year's annual Renew London report, which outlines the city's successes and lessons learned from the 2021 construction program. The report also previews the important work that's planned for 2022. It flags potential risks and some of the measures that we're taking to mitigate those risks. As the report notes, last year, the city managed approximately 100 million in infrastructure construction projects. This included projects that enhanced road safety, improved traffic flow for all road users, and helped maintain our infrastructure in a good state of repair. And while 2021 was a busy and challenging year, I'm pleased to share that the vast majority of construction projects were done on time and on budget. As we've outlined in the companion reports, items 4.2 through 4.3 and 4.4 actually, staff are seeking contract increases of 1.68 million combined to address budget pressures on a handful of specific 2021 projects. However, it's important to note that 2021's $100 million construction program will still come in under budget overall due to unused contingencies. As a general rule, the city allocates 10% contingency on our construction projects, and at the end of the year, any unused contingency funds get rolled back into programs to support renewal work for the following year. And this year is going to be a very active construction season. In 2022, it's on track to be the City of London's largest construction season in terms of both the number of projects and the value of work. After a $100 million program in 2021, we're set to deliver $190 million in construction this year. This year's budgets will invest in supporting the city's growing population needs, making improvements to aging infrastructure, and expanding London's active transportation network. A full listing of the 2022 projects has been plotted out on a map and posted to the city's website with information online for all projects. The Renew report also identifies the top 10 projects for 2022 based on criteria like the scope of work, the duration of construction, and impacts on road users. We've packaged the top 10 projects together into a handy story map tool that shows where these important projects are happening as visuals to help illustrate the improvements that are coming and outlines the benefits for each project. All of this information can be viewed at london.ca/construction. Over the last 2 years, COVID-19, global supply chain interruptions, inflationary pressures, and labor shortages have impacted many sectors, and municipal construction is no exception. There are several potential risks for the upcoming construction season that may impact project budgets and schedules. And while it's challenging to predict how emerging pressures may affect 2022 construction, the team is focused on continuing to monitor industry trends and prioritize flexibility and mitigation strategies to respond. As London experiences larger and more complex construction seasons, the city continues to prioritize communications to ensure impacted businesses, residents, and property owners are informed before and during construction. Work on several of the key 2022 projects is already underway, and communication efforts on many of these projects are ramping up already. We know construction is challenging, especially in light of the impacts of the pandemic, and we also recognize that these projects aren't happening in isolation. So it's critical that our teams are talking to each other and working in tandem to coordinate how these projects roll out. Our goal, as always, is to minimize disruption and maintain access as much as possible while completing the construction efficiently. So as we begin rolling out what will be London's busiest construction season yet, the team is in a good position to deliver these much needed infrastructure projects on time and on budget, and in a way that best supports businesses and residents who are impacted. So with that, I'll conclude my introduction to the Renew report. And other than that, say that myself and my team are available to answer questions anytime about the work presented in today's reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dan. Looking to committee or visiting councilors for any questions or comments regarding items 4.1 through to 4.3, and I'll start my speakers list with Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. Through you, Chair, to Ms. Dan. I appreciate your comments with regard to using contingencies to deal with the overruns that you've indicated in 4.2 and 3 with the contract price increases. I was very mindful of any potential risk exposure on the capital plan. And unless you say otherwise, this may be a backhanded question, but just to be confident that this has no risk exposure on the capital plan as has been prepared.
Ms. Dan?
Through the chair, yeah, with an annual construction program of this scale, there's always be the odd project that encounters some impacts that couldn't be foreseen through the project. And as I mentioned earlier, we are seeking some budget adjustments on these specific projects, but we were able to complete the overall program with some unspent funds remaining.
Thank you for that, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Dan.
Okay, Councillor Van Holst.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. So I think first thing I'd like to do is ask if during the construction we can put some more of those signs and perhaps work hard to get the motorists to use the zipper merge. I think that's how it was described in the previous term, because I noticed that in many cases, motorists will turn 50 meters of one lane traffic into 500 meters of one lane traffic because they think that it's more polite to merge sooner than later. And sometimes they're even reluctant to let people merge at the end when it's that process that really helps the traffic move quicker. So I like it when we see those signs up that direct how to make that merging, and maybe we could even use our billboards to throw up a graphic on there and just remind people that that's the way to keep traffic flowing quickly.
Ms. Dana.
The next thing I was looking at, this is 4.2. Page 101 describes that the infrastructure required some non-typical supplies and some specialized sub-trades. And I wondered if you could, through the chair, to just elucidate on that a little bit.
Okay, Ms. Dan?
Yes, through the chair, we have been seeing that the complexity of our transportation projects has been increasing. More and more, we're needing to align multiple tasks as part of a single project. We're trying to align our renewal needs to get in and get everything fixed at the same time. Utility coordination is also a really important part of that. But we're also seeing some new innovative design elements that often require different specialized subtrades to come in. And there's a lot of coordination that's involved in that. And so those are some of the things that are also contributing to both budget and schedule pressures for our projects.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. I think that was clear in the report, but I wonder what those could you give me an example of a non-typical supply, or what a specialized sub-trade might be doing that's different than what we usually see?
Ms. Dan?
Through the chair, one of those would be some of the work that we do with utility coordinations, having to bring in specialized sub-trades that are qualified to be able to work in certain utility areas with certain utility infrastructure. Also, some of the work that we've been doing to bring in new elements in our streets where, as we move forward with additional infrastructure along for cycling, pedestrians to manage all modes of traffic, it involves specialized pavement markings and other sorts of elements that, again, we have to coordinate a lot of sub-trades to be able to have that all come together at the end of a project.
Councillor, are you satisfied?
Yes, thank you. And one final question about these items. There were some cost increases, and I noticed a couple of those were done in-house, the design. So I wondered what we might have gleaned from these experiences that might allow us to predict costs with greater accuracy in the future.
Ms. Dan?
Yes, there was a couple of the projects where they saw overlapping factors. There's a number of factors influencing the cost increase. In some cases, it was contract schedule extension. We had a project that ended up being extended over 2 construction seasons. We also saw some delays related to utility locates. So in one project, both years saw multiple week delays getting started, waiting for locating our underground utilities before we could start digging. We also did some coordinated work where we added in some additional infrastructure that it made the most sense and was the most cost-effective way to be able to address that work while we already had a contractor engaged at competitive unit prices.
Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you. Do we think that we might need to come up with ways to mitigate the delays in locates?
Ms. Dan?
Yes, there's actually several mitigations that we've already put in place to try to address a number of the pressures we're anticipating for 2022. Locates is one of those. One of the things that we've been doing is working with the industry to move to a dedicated locate system for our city projects. So locate requests would still go through the one call program, like everybody, we have to call before we dig. But from that point, it's sent over to be direct supplied and have a higher level of service through our locate service providers so that those projects get first service, and you can do a just-in-time delivery on locates, which makes them be more nimble as they go forward. So it's a trial for this year. We're looking forward to see if that can help improve some of the delays that we've seen on those projects. Some other mitigations we've done this year is really working to get all of our larger tenders out as early as possible. Our three biggest tenders, not three biggest, but the two RT projects and the Victoria Bridge were all tendered before the end of last year to make sure that we could get out at the start of the season. We're also working to expedite the process for getting contract documents executed once the low bid is confirmed, which everything that we're doing is really to try to buy back as much time as we can for the contractor at the start of the project.
Councillor Van Holst.
And Ms. Dan, I appreciate the innovations, and thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Dan, I don't know if you would like to take this opportunity to circle back to one of the Councillor Van Holst's earlier comments about just traffic mitigation and education of the public as we are coming into construction season of what we can anticipate for Londoners.
Absolutely. Thank you through the chair. We do a lot of work to try to find ways to mitigate impacts for construction for all modes of people that travel in and around town, and especially in the core. We have a lot of work happening in the core this year. We do use enhanced signage in around the core to make sure that people can easily find their way and navigate through construction. Another thing that we like to do is encourage, again, those communications. And so we want to make sure that if something is happening in someone's neighborhood, they know about it and they know how to get around it. So we'll be providing timely updates on any road closures and traffic impacts through service announcements through the media and on the city's website. For anybody that lives or works downtown, we strongly recommend following the city on social media, because any of those traffic interruptions will be posted there. And then if you're one of the folks that is directly impacted by a project, you can visit the project website and sign up for emails where you can get regular email updates from the project team directly.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I know I've enjoyed our social media posts, as sometimes I drive into it and I remember that I'm actually the one who approved the traffic that I'm sitting in at that moment. So thank you for what we do for that. Looking to final questions or comments from committee. Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I appreciate the reports, and I think it's a good example of why we are pretty careful with the capital budgets and building in contingencies for this exact problem. Sometimes you do run into issues. The example of Lauren Ave and English, the reconstruction there, and running into the water issues, that was quite disruptive to the overall schedule, but obviously caused a lot of extra work that needed to be done. And we're going to have to increase the budget for that particular project, but I'm glad that some of the other ones came a bit under. I do think, given the number of issues that are identified in the sort of retrospective report around 2021, that looking ahead at 2022, the contingency budgets that we have been traditionally budgeting for, we may be running out of room in terms of being able to buffer those kinds of pressures as we see the sort of inflationary pressures on construction outpacing what's in the contingency budgets, right? So that's going to be, we had some room last year. I don't think we're going to have so much room next year or the year after that. But I do want to say a lot of these projects in 2021 were in Ward 4, you look over the list and you're like, wow, that's a lot of projects in the one ward. Quite disruptive, honestly. Like, people did a really good job, but they were major projects. You know, the Mornington one in the residential area, the commercial street in Dundas, the bike lanes on bridges on both sides of Highbury. You know, really important projects. People are happy to see them in the rear view. And, you know, there's some touch-up work that needs to be done on a couple of these projects, but really important that we got them done. I thought the contractors in particular and the city staff working on those projects did a great job trying to make them as smooth as possible. You know, the bumps along the road for sure, but really important, and glad to have especially Dundas Street finished, and, you know, just wrap it up now, and we'll have decades of no more construction on that section, and that people will really appreciate that, I think. So thanks very much for all three of those reports and the work on the projects.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions or comments in person or on the screen, I am calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Item 4.4, the Metamora Stormwater Outfall Replacement Contract Award Increase. Looking for a mover and a seconder to put this one on the floor. Moved by Mayor Holder, seconded by Councillor Fife Millar. Looking to committee or visiting councillors to see if there's any questions or comments in regards to this one. Seeing none, calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Item 4.5, the contract award tender for the Adelaide Street North CPR Underpass project. It's a regular result. Mr. McCrae has joined us today with a preamble. Mr. McCrae, could you give your overview, and then we'll move on to a mover and a seconder?
Certainly, Chair. Appreciate that. Yeah, this report recommends the award of a tender and contract administration for the Adelaide Underpass. It's a notable report given the scope and complexity of the project and the financing associated with the award. This is a city building project that will create a new underpass, grade separation, with elevated multi-use pathways, a permanent utility corridor on the east side of Adelaide Street, new storm and groundwater management infrastructure, and improved streetscaping elements. It's an economic development project that will increase the safety and reliability of the corridor for people and goods. It will improve connections between neighborhoods and will provide complete streets amenities and active transportation infrastructure. During the 2018 budget process, Council moved the project timing forward a decade, and a $58.3 million project account was established based on the environmental assessment project estimate available at the time. So since 2019, design, property acquisition, utility relocations, and community consultations have been ongoing. Railway negotiations have occurred, resulting in a rail contribution of $8.75 million. And $11.1 million of federal and provincial funding was also secured via the Investing in Canada infrastructure program for the active transportation components. The construction procurement process for the project began in April of last year with a pre-qualification followed by a tender in November. The results of the procurement process identify a total cost to complete the project of $87.6 million. So requiring an additional $29.1 million in city funding. Due to its unique aspects, this project is particularly prone to the current cost inflation that has become apparent just recently due to the project's unique aspects. The primary items contributing to the cost escalation are identified in the report. And the top three contributors are current volatility in the price of structural steel, labor shortages and supply chain disruptions that are creating rapid construction cost escalation across all items, and the complex solution required to manage subsurface groundwater at this site that requires a specialized contractor to install. Financing solution to support the completion of the project is outlined in the report and involves the deferral of 2 transportation capital projects, along with additional debt financing. So in conclusion, the procurement process has identified a competent team to complete the project at a competitive cost. So subject to your approval, this 2-year capital construction project would commence this spring and extend into 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCrae. Looking for a mover and a seconder to put this item on the floor. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Fife-Millar. And I'm opening my speakers list. I will start with Mayor Holder and then Councillor Van Merbergen.
Thanks very much. And Mr. McCrae, thank you for your detailed report. A couple of quick things first. For the benefit of everyone, what are the 2 transportation projects that will be deferred as a result of trying to find a way to make this work financially, please?
Mr. McCrae.
Through the chair.
Yep, through the chair, we look through the transportation capital program to look for projects that have flexibility in their schedule and can accommodate some deferral of a few years. So we've identified 2 projects, one of which is the renewal of the concrete pavement on the freeway section of Highbury Avenue between Hamilton Road and Highway 401. So this is a large project that we're saving for. It's a big infrastructure need, and it continues to be on the radar. However, we feel that a deferral of a few years, 3 to 5 years, is manageable, and that as we monitor the deterioration of that concrete pavement, we know that it's approaching the end of its service life, but it is very predictable and slow in its deterioration. So the management of that asset, while it will be a lower level of service due to the deferral, it is a low risk, and we can manage that with monitoring and patching as necessary. The second project is an improvement to Southdale Road West and Wickerson Road, so at around the intersection of those 2 roads. The project is primarily for operational improvements, i.e. so to flatten the profile on Southdale Road to improve sight lines. It will also provide sidewalks and bicycle lanes and a multi-use path connection. The project is still intended to proceed, but the recommendation is to create capacity in the current year by deferring it into the upcoming development charge background study process to set a new near-term timing for it. And this recognizes that while the project should proceed, there is some flexibility in the schedule, and that it connects developing areas, but there's no development directly adjacent to it, and some flexibility is possible there in the timing of those improvements.
Mayor Holder.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, back through you, Mr. McCrae. I appreciate that information. That's helpful to know. The separate question I've got relates to all the other projects as well relating to ICIP. I won't lie, I was surprised whether it's 29.1 or 29.3 as per the report overrun. And you've explained the reasons why. Can we anticipate that the other projects that were approved by council will experience the same pressures, and to what extent will that impact us in terms of other projects going forward?
Thank you, Mr. McCrae. Or Ms. Chair, or both.
I'm happy to respond. Thank you. We carefully monitor the impacts to our capital programs, and Ms. Dan got into that a bit in her recent words. While we monitor them, for this specific project, a lot has changed since the project budget was established in 2018, and it is particularly prone to some of the current economic factors due to the unique nature of the project. And so the specialized contractors, the unique elements like the structural steel, for instance, the fluctuation in the commodity price for that are factors that really disproportionately affected this project and the unique nature of it. And these kind of complex projects like grade separations, there tends not to be a lot of them underway across the province at any given time. So the required contractors to build them tend to be under pressure more under pressure with respect to those supply chain and labor shortage pressures. So we are, to your point, we are carefully monitoring current conditions across all projects. However, I would suggest that this project, due to its unique nature and scope, is an anomaly within the entire capital program and more prone to the pressures that we're currently seeing.
Mayor Holder.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McCray. Look, I don't think there's anyone in council that wouldn't recognize the importance of this project. And I think when done, well, right now it's probably like Dundas Street in Ward 4, where there's some challenges associated with short-term inconvenience. But I think when done, it will be a very significant contribution to traffic flow and people flow through the center part of the city. Having said that, I'm mindful Ms. Dan gave us some very clear rationale for or at least rationale for the overruns as you have here with this project. And would I be right to imagine that the other projects that have been approved will have, if not this dramatic an impact, have cost overruns? Are you at the point where you've projected what that might look like, just to give us as councillors some sense of what to anticipate with the other projects? I'm talking about the projects approved through ICIP at this point.
Mr. McCray.
The project monitoring has not to date identified dramatic escalations in the ICIP projects. However, we do continue to monitor, and as necessary, if project exceedances are identified, those certainly will be brought to the attention of council through a budget amendment and business case updates as necessary.
Mayor Holder.
So, well, Chair, thank you. And thank you, Mr. McCray. Look, I guess it's as good as it gets in some circumstances. I'm not anticipating that labor costs or costs of materials are going to go down anytime soon. And to the extent that this was a surprise, I feel we have to proceed with this. But I can anticipate that the other projects may have some of those pressures, if not to this financial degree, certainly will have some. So to the extent that you're able to monitor, maybe buy futures and steel, I don't know, but whatever it will take to help mitigate some of those costs will be helpful, because I know this council in good faith, when they approved the 10 projects that were in place, look, no one's naive. We could have anticipated there may be some overruns. This is not insignificant. And I wish you well in this planning. These are important projects that we've approved as a council, and I'm mindful that the federal and provincial government don't come back in for cost overruns and help support those differences. So it's all on us, and trying to be sensitive to the taxpayers. So your deferral of some projects, from as long as from a safety standpoint, which I'm confident you've said you've been monitoring, will be the issue that I think we'll always pay mind to. But I appreciate the report you've given so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Holder. Councillor Van Merbergen.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank Mr. McCray for that fulsome verbal report on what amounts to a real eye-opener in terms of 50% ballooned budget on this particular project. It goes without saying, though, that this project, the underpass on Adelaide, is absolutely critical to the entire city. We've been waiting years for this to go ahead, and the majority of Londoners would agree with that. So it is vitally important to, as was stated earlier, economic development, transportation flows, et cetera. And I do think, while it is an eye-opener, it was originally set, what in today's world is some time ago, this budget, and most of these factors appear to be external. I believe the way staff have approached this in terms of trying to mitigate this increase in budget makes a lot of sense, and I give them credit for that. Specifically, I'd like to speak to Southdale Road. The project, which is being put on hold for the time being, is on the extreme western end, close to West Elborn. I think it's intelligent and makes sense that we focus coming immediately off West or Wonderland, heading west, and expanding in that vein, and then in a few years being able to perhaps do the work that's necessary by Wickerson and West Elborn. So again, I think this makes sense on the whole. It is an eye-opener in terms of, the cost or the ballooning budget. But I think it's being handled in an intelligent, smart way. So thank you.
Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to Mr. McCray. The project, as has been said, is, I think, considered kind of a mission critical one for London. And people are, as the mayor suggested, going to be thrilled when it's completed. Previous projects that reported some increases did so because there was a delay in the completion of the project. So I'm wondering how confident we are on the timelines for this one.
Mr. McCray.
The procurement process for this project was thorough, in that we initiated an initial pre-qualification process, and that was because of the complexity to build the project. So we're confident that we have a competent contractor that can deliver this project to completion. Obviously, there's unknowns along with any construction project, and we've included a substantial contingency amount of $5.5 million in this contract to deal with that. And as it relates specifically to schedule, a lot of rigor has gone into the development of that. We, upon tender award, will obviously review that with the contractor and highlight critical path items so that we can proactively address them, and also dovetailing into Ms. Dan's earlier comments, right, and that applying some of those solutions that are being developed for other projects, and certainly apply them to this one.
Thank you, Councillor Van Holst. Are you satisfied?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think everybody agrees, and it's been said already, so I won't belabor the point. This project has to go ahead. It's absolutely critical to the transportation future of the city. So obviously, I'm not happy with the numbers, and I will say I'm not happy that the Highbury Ave regeneration is going to have to be put down the road a little bit. That is a key entry point into the east end of the city from Highway 401. for traffic coming into the city, commuters, families coming in from Point South from St. Thomas. It's going to be a key access point as well. It's going to run through the East London Link Rapid Transit line. I know we're talking about an area south of that, but the quality of that road matters for people coming in and out of the city doing business. And with much of the industrial part of the city being located in the East End, it's a heavy truck use road as well. Certainly the VMP has taken some of that load off, but it hasn't removed all of it. So I'm not thrilled with it, but I recognize the realities of budget, and apparently so does my cat. But I do. I hope that we continue to prioritize that Highbury Ave renewal, recognizing that budgets are a thing, and that it's considered really high on the list to get moving when we can fund it properly. And I see Mr. McRae nodding and acknowledging that. And I just have to emphasize it because it feels so often that some of these projects we're told are coming. And I think on the other hand, people who use Highbury Ave might appreciate a little bit of a break since we had a rather significant period of time with construction on the Widening Bridge renewal. And of course, that Highbury and Hamilton Road intersection is going to need some significant renewal. And I think that's down the road in about 2029 or 2030, if memory serves correctly. So there's work to be done there. So I hope that when we're looking at that particular project being delayed, we're considering how that's going to play into the renewal of that key intersection at Hamilton and Highbury as well. But certainly the Adelaide Street underpass has to happen, and this will have my support. Obviously none of us are happy about this price increase, but if this had been done 30 years ago, it would have been much cheaper. And unfortunately that didn't happen. So it's up to our council to move it forward.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Looking for any further questions or comments? Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. Certainly glad to see the project going ahead and people recognizing the need for the grade separation. I'm sure because of the frequency, everybody who's involved in this call has been blocked by a train at this grade crossing, sometimes for 20, 25 minutes. It just goes on and on and on. And it's absolutely maddening for people who end up being blocked, whether they're walking or trying to bike through or in a car waiting. And it just paralyzes activity in the city every time there's a blockage. It's not particularly safe, and the grade separation is going to finally solve that problem. So I'm glad to see it finally get to this point. I know we prioritized it back in 2016, get the environmental assessment underway, really tried to accelerate it, bring it forward a decade in the capital plan. You can imagine if we'd left it where it is, how expensive it would be 10 or 12 years from now to be working on this project. So I know that it's gone up in cost, but it'll never be cheaper than it is now to do this project. And frankly, look at the three bids. If we'd only had the third bid, we'd be looking at $30 million more from the third highest or third lowest bid that we received. So, you know, I know it's not fun to deal with budget increases like this. I think the project is necessary. It's going to really resolve a major longstanding problem. I think Councillor Lewis's point about delay, and it's not just delay, it's delay caused by lack of ambition, you know, in terms of the capital program. And we've gone through periods of time where we've taken on fewer capital projects and been less ambitious in terms of what we're going to do, both in terms of growth projects, life cycle replacement. Sometimes that shows up in deteriorating assets, right? We're not replacing things as quickly as we should be. And we went through a period where we really were spending a lot less on the capital budget than we should have been. Then thinking back like 3-4 terms ago, that was a period where there was a lot less spending on capital. Like, you know, the capital budget would be like $56 million or something, the tax supported side. Now it's more than double that. And we're doing a lot more in terms of capital projects. We're taking on a lot more projects. And we're able to do that because the province and the federal government are supporting those things in a way that they weren't back then. And I actually think we're in a much better place now. And, you know, taking on this project the way that it's being taken on now, I think is the most cost-effective way to do it. I think we have to maintain this level of ambition in terms of the capital program. We got a lot of needs all throughout the community, and the sooner we get these things done, the better. Sometimes it's really easy to defer and put things off and do them later, and then bang, you get hit with something like this where really significantly more expensive. So projects like that northern widening of Warncliffe, where we finally made the bridge wider, the rail bridge there a couple of years ago, that was a really important project to get done. You imagine if we didn't get that done when we did, and it was coming up now, we'd have the same kind of price increases on that because it's the same kind of problem, structural steel, things like that. So I'm really glad that there's support to move ahead. I know deferring these projects is not great, but that's the value in having a 10-year capital plan, long-range planning, careful maintenance of the assets, and monitoring of what the condition of those things are. We do have some flexibility built in, and I'm glad to see us making use of it now to make sure this project doesn't have to delay anymore. Because if we tendered it next year, I think we'd just be looking at an even bigger number. The last thing I want to say is I think sometimes we miss the fact that we do the real estate part, land acquisition, early on in these projects when we know exactly what we need after the environmental assessment's done. And that's an area where we've really benefited from early action. And it's something we need to keep doing, which is buying up the properties that are needed in advance of the actual construction of the projects. We could have been on the hook for a lot more land acquisition costs on this project. We have a lot more land acquisition to do for a number of other projects. And I think we have to maintain that same kind of aggressive approach that Realty Services has taken, which is to try and acquire those properties in the open market as early as possible once we know we're going ahead with the project, because it can save us a lot of money in the long run to take that approach. So I appreciate the report and the comments from my colleagues in particular.
Thank you. Looking for last call for questions or comments. Okay, calling the question on item 4.5.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
4.6, contract award tender for Southdale Road West improvements, phase 1. Looking to committee for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Fife Millar, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Looking to committee for questions or comments. I will start with Councillor Van Merbergen.
Well, thank you, Chair. This dovetails with what I spoke to earlier on 2.5. So again, this is the awarding of the contract for the widening of Southdale Road from just west of Wonderland down to Bostwick, well, a little bit past Bostwick Farnham. Crucially needed, as I stated earlier. This is a great day for the Southwest, and I wholeheartedly will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking to committee for any other further questions or comments? Seeing none, calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. Our final item is item 4.7, asking for a report on downtown road closures. It's a letter in your package submitted by Councillor Van Holst. I will begin with Councillor Van Holst to introduce his motion, then we will look for a mover and a seconder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, of course, this has got to do with non-construction road closures we've seen in the past few weeks. I'll point out that in the Municipal Act, one of the roles of council, 22.4 D1, says that we're to ensure the accountability and transparency of the operations of the municipality, including the activities of the senior management of the municipality. So, when a business owner complains that the street was closed, then we can't just not know about that. So I'm not sure I like the wording of the motion, but it is clear that that's all I need in a report to feel that we've covered that obligation of ours. So I'll put that on the floor, just asking staff report back to our committee regarding the justifications and costs of the recent non-construction related street closures.
Thank you. So Councillor Van Holst has moved his motion that he's read out to you, looking to committee to see if there is a seconder. Seeing none, I will do a last call as we have a mover and no seconder. Okay, sorry, Councillor, there is no seconder for your motion. Mayor Holder?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that we receive the report and take no action.
Okay, moved by Mayor Holder for receive the communication with a take no action. Looking for a seconder. I will second that. Looking to committee for a question or comments. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the take no action added to this, I'll vote against it. But you know, I do think we have an obligation to look into that. In the short term, I think there's long-term ways to deal with some of these challenges as well. But and I'll try and bring those forward to the appropriate committee. But I do think it's our responsibility to inquire about these things, whether they came to us in a public report or one that was in camera. I'm afraid I don't know why, for instance, Richmond Street would have been closed. So that was my concern, and I know there was complaints about funds lost by business owners due to that. So I'll leave it out. I'll vote against that for that reason, and may bring it forward again at council. If this doesn't pass, then of course I'll just move that we receive the communication. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for any questions or comments. Seeing none, calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-1.
Thank you. That concludes our items for direction. Moving on to section 5, being our deferred matters and additional business. As per your added, we do have a 5.1 and a 5.2. 5.2 has been added, and it's the Kenmore Place sidewalk petition. There is a petition in the clerk's office with 25 signatures. They had requested, just for committee's interest, delegation status today, but they are unable to attend with us today, so that delegation status is no longer pertinent to today's meeting. Councillor Helmer, as I believe item 5.2 is your ward.
Yeah, well, I wanted to move 5.1 because I think it's first. I'm happy to just receive the deferred matters list, and then I do have some comments about 5.2, and I'd like to move a motion just to receive that, and then also add a being noted clause on there. I'll give colleagues some context for what's going on in terms of that location after we're dealt with the deferred matters list.
Perfect. So we have a mover we'll deal with them separate to keep it nice and clean today. So 5.1 is moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Mayor Holder. Any questions or comments strictly on the deferred matters list that's before us today? Seeing none, calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Point 2, I will move to Councillor Helmer for his overview of this item and the motion that he has in mind.
Okay, thanks, colleagues. So this is a very good news situation, which is, I would tell you, the residents on the street at Kenmore Place have been after me for years to get a sidewalk installed on their street. You know, they went through the new sidewalk, warranted sidewalk process, to identify that it was a priority. It's especially a fellow who became a grandfather and his grandkids live on the street just down the road from where he lives. And he's very, very keen to have a sidewalk there so that the kids can learn how to ride their bikes and walk on the street safely. There's a bunch of other families that have got young kids and they like the idea of having a sidewalk installed for the same reason. We have, of course, anytime we're putting in a sidewalk, there's impacts on the way things are now. And in this area, we're following the policy, which is let's find one side of the street where we can put a sidewalk. We're not going to put sidewalks on both sides. There are some impacts, one way or the other. And you've got a situation where you have sort of an equal number of driveways, pretty much the same kind of setbacks and built form on both sides of the street. The street lights are on the east side. And so I think that's why it's preferred to have the sidewalk directly underneath the street lights, a little bit better from a lighting perspective, probably safer for people in terms of their perceptions of safety walking around at night. And so staff have identified the east side as the sort of preferred location. I think there's an opportunity to have a bit more discussion with the residents about, is the east side the right location, or maybe it could go on the west. Some of the people who are probably the biggest proponents for a sidewalk on the street, they live on the west side and they'd love to have it on the west side. So I think there's room to have some discussion about, should it be on the east or should it be on the west? So I would just move that we receive the communication from Mr. Jameson and having it being noted that staff will engage the residents further about whether the sidewalk should be on the east or the west. Hopefully there's support for that. I think it's the best way of handling the issue that's been raised by Mr. Jameson. He happens to live on the east side of the street and is one of the people who I think is most directly impacted by the construction of the sidewalk, given where his property is located.
Okay, thank you. The clerk is just entering that into eScribe and will let me know when we can refresh to review the wording. Looking to committee for questions or comments in regards to this. I will start with Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps Councillor Helmer could tell us approximately how many homes are on this particular street.
I believe the communication said 28. Is that accurate, Councillor? Okay.
28. Okay. Because to me, that's crucial when looking at these projects, because if there's buy-in from the actual residents, then it behooves us as a city to take a serious look at this. But as we know, and many of us know, when there is no buy-in from residents, that's where it becomes very problematic. So no, I'll be supporting this motion. It seems reasonable. Thanks.
So Councillor Van Meerbergen, will you be seconding the motion then?
Yeah, I'll second it. No problem.
Okay, so the clerk's making note of that. Okay, the wording is ready. If you wish to refresh your screens in eScribe, it should come up to you. Looking for questions or comments from any other committee or guest members. Okay, I would just have one question through to staff, just making sure that we are early enough in the process that this is not already slated for tender or contract, that this is still the ideal time to have these community conversations. Mr. McRae?
Yes, Madam Chair. It is early enough. We, as Councillor Helmer pointed out, we did assess the project design based on a number of conditions on the street. But fortunately for this specific project, there is design flexibility. And so that the letter that was sent to the neighborhood on February 11th invited further discussion between the staff and the residents. And so we've started to hear some of that feedback now. So we're certainly amenable to doing some further engagement. It can make the project better. If we listen to the residents, hear their concerns, and explore the design a bit further. So yes, there is time, and we're certainly good with what's being proposed.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, as it's valuable information for us to know as we make an informed decision. Looking for any other questions or other feedback? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded and is available in eScribe. Calling the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
That discussion, that concludes the deferred matters and additional business that I am aware of. Seeing nothing further from committee, I will look for adjournment in a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Van Merbergen. We can do a hand vote of all in favor.
The motion carries 6-0.
Thank you everyone for your time today in discussion, and I wish you a wonderful week.